joined today by Jesse Hanson, Clinical Director of HOLOS. Jesse, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm honored to be here, Nicole. Thank you so much and look forward to our conversation.
The conversation we're going to be having is around psychedelic retreat centers. This might be a new word for many. For others, it's something they might be familiar with. What's your experience and what are you noticing right now in this field?
Yeah, I definitely acknowledge as a health professional, I've been in this field for almost 20 years, and in the last 2 to 3 years, there's just been an amazing sort of renaissance and reawakening of what was lost in the 60s. Is that, people are starting to realize that not all of the existing methodologies of healthcare that's out there right now are really that effective. We continue to have increasingly high levels of addiction and mental health issues, despite quote unquote advancements in psychopharmacology, et cetera, health services. And so really what I'm noticing is that there is some kind of a awareness that's rising, that people are starting to want to really heal maybe from the inside out rather than looking for a quick fix. And so the idea of a psychedelic retreat center is different than a psychedelic company, and it's different than the clinical and molecular pursuit of much research that is important work, and I stand behind it fully. I also speak the voice that it's not just the psychedelic substance that really is making the change. It's a lot of other variables, including intention, the set and the setting, as well as other kind of peripheral treatments that can really support how a person can really heal from everything from trauma to depression to palliative care towards end of life. They're starting to continue to explore the depth of field of how much psychedelic assisted therapies can really help people.
You said that a psychedelic retreat center is not a psychedelic company. So if an investor is looking to get involved, where should they be looking and what should they be looking for?
Yeah, and to clarify that, Nicole was saying that it is a psychedelic company. It's not the exact same as sort of the psychedelic companies that came out of the market first, that are really focused on finding the molecular understanding of psilocybin particularly, but other psychedelics as well. And so, with the retreat center model, it's still a psychedelic company. However, it's also a hospitality and a wellness company, which are also have been thriving businesses. And I think as we all want to heal from the collective trauma of COVID-19 phenomenon, those hospitality and wellness sectors are going to, I believe, see another surge. So it's a more complex and more diverse sort of investment strategy.
Okay,
And
you should be looking at peripheral wellness companies or psychedelic companies that are also involved in, let's say, a retreat opens in Costa Rica, maybe looking at how they're contributing to the economy or the environment. Is that kind of what you're saying, or how they're working with locals? Is that the from an ethics perspective, is that what people
yeah,
are looking for?
yeah. I mean, I don't want to say what anyone should or shouldn't do. I'd say we all got to make our own choices. And yet I would say that, if we want to look at the theme of conscious capitalism, meaning it's not capitalism that's bad and just innately greedy. There's a great beauty and creativity and competition that can happen in the capitalist structure. What matters is, what am I doing with all this money that I've acquired? And if I'm not just looking for rapid returns, which I think that is still a high likelihood with most psychedelic retreat-based companies because of the wellness hospitality aspect as well. It's sort of three hot markets, but is really to look at that, if I can make an investment in a company that's not only going to help forward the psychedelic renaissance and therefore be successful, but also do things that help, local communities and help people really, again, in my language as a clinical psychologist would say, to, rewire their brain and body more completely, rather than a lot of what's existing out there is based on either, sort of focusing the mind to control the body, or taking a legal substance that will suppress symptoms, right? This is a whole different approach that says, let's get to the root cause of why addiction exists, why depression is there, bipolar, etc. So it's very exciting from that angle as well. And I just want to name one other quick thing, Nicole, that hopefully would help our listeners better clarify why this psychedelic retreat model is such an interesting investment topic, is because when we hear the word psychedelics, we immediately usually think of the Grateful Dead and or a bag of mushrooms or something. really that word is really about expanding our psyche. The psychedelic tryptophans are the chemicals that actually create psychedelic states of consciousness through substances. And so in that way, it's not about the psychedelics, it's not even about the tryptophans, it's about helping people get into a different state of understanding of who they are. And when we can frame it that way, then we're not as reliant on just the molecule or just the substance itself to think that that's the magic fix, like we've kind of been programmed. We are more looking at it as, wow, this is a chance to really learn how to rewire my brain. And that's what tryptophans gives us, is a short period of time where more of our brain is active and connected. And so that's what creates quote unquote psychedelics. So I just named that to frame that when we look at that. In other words, I believe we could see a lot of what we saw with the cannabis, where it was so hot and investments going everywhere, and then in the end, most companies kind of fell off and a few sustained. That is likely with solely looking for an investment in just psychedelics, like research-based, create a product, versus investments that are going to be geared towards this retreat model. That's really going to be about a more holistic and a new paradigm of healing and wellness, and the use of psychedelics as just one agent amongst many, many other agents and variables that help the person really change who they are.
And it's an immersive experience as well. You had mentioned set and setting, and I think for our listeners, they'll be familiar with that terminology. If you don't mind touching on that a little bit, and then maybe comparing the difference between an experience in a clinic versus going to a retreat.
Great question. What is common now and what is out there already is often in a very clinical setting, meaning that I'm more of a patient. I'm going in, as far as I've understood the protocols. I'm not saying there aren't other companies that are maybe adapting this a bit, but it's very minimal, if any, psychotherapeutic preparation. It's really just sort of, you can go through a certain intake criteria and then go into a room and take, whether it's ketamine or psilocybin. Those are the two primaries right now. As I understand, you are guided, you're supported, there's a person in there, but it's not, and often sometimes it's even fluorescent light buildings. Some companies are more attuned to ambiance. And then I think the hardest part is the coming out of something so deep and so mind-opening, and then sort of having to be thrown into a city setting or a sidewalk or even just, a car right away is a very different experience than going somewhere for, say, a week, and you have a few days of preparation, learning about the science behind it, learning about your own psychology, your own personality, what might come up, and be given techniques as to how to have a really great experience, and then having a few days on the other side to just soak in hot tubs and go on nature walks and hang out with great people. Hopefully you can feel it just from the words. It's a whole different depth of how that can happen. And as far as I understand that, a lot of the goals of some of the investments that are really geared towards molecular extraction is for mass distribution, whether in psychopharmacological measures or whether in private company branded products, all of which I think is great. I think it's good to push the edge here. And again, just taking that little treat you ordered from the internet on a random Saturday is not the same as, and I don't know how much this will matter to investors or not. I hope more and more that also the method that I'm encouraging of this retreat center and sort of a deeper dive, if you will, is more in alignment with our ancestors, with the ancient people and tribes and indigenous people of all of our ancestors. When you circle it back far enough, that this is how this, they will call medicine, has been used for lifetimes, long before we could extract molecules. So I like that too. There feels like some kind of honoring of those that have walked before us, and as opposed to extracting everything and putting it into a chemical agent. So I think there's a value in that investment as well, to help all of us kind of stay connected to the earth and each other.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're saying that you believe the retreat as a healing modality is more effective than a clinical setting.
That's, yes, I'll put that out as a hypothesis, and as everything starts to unfold in this journey that I'm on, providing clinical data and meta-analysis to be able to really show that at a clinical level, at an infallible level, that's the goal. But right now, based on 20 years of experience in this field, I would absolutely say that's my hypothesis, that the overall quality of life measurements, the overall anxiety, depression scores, trauma scores, I believe we're going to see a beautiful increase in how those show the effectiveness of this kind of retreat setting. And also name as a longtime private practice therapist, as well as having worked in centers like this as a therapist, I would say that I'm willing to give up a successful private practice in Toronto to take this adventure, because I believe that the next level of transformation for people doesn't exist in a 1 hour clinical meeting in a somewhat often stuffy room in the middle of a city, you know. So I do believe in it, and I'll hopefully have the data to back that up soon.
Do you anticipate that one of the barriers for people might be the cost of these retreats? Obviously, more time, more investment in talent and expertise, such as yourself. These things that you're mentioning, such as the location, even getting there. Do you think that's going to be a problem?
Absolutely. And I think that it's a balance. And interesting enough, I know that the Canadian Psychedelic Association is really supporting a idea of both for-profit and non-profit psychedelic companies, whether they are clinically research molecular driven or whether they are retreat driven or a mixture of both, that they're really looking to create a framework that will allow for supporting each other, sharing data more freely and openly than most companies usually do. So I would say that absolutely it is call it a problem. I would call it a growth opportunity. And I see a lot of great things happening in the field already. The 3 or 4 companies I know that are going to be launching in either late this year or early next year, all of them have involved some kind of sponsorship and charity and giving back to not only people who can't afford to get there, but also to indigenous cultures that have helped preserve this way of transformation. So I think my hope is that as time goes, that the businesses can learn how to run smoother and smoother. Larger for-profits can help to support people that can't get through these programs. So absolutely, and yet I think that's going to be the byproduct of almost anything new and cutting edge and innovative. And we saw the same thing with Tesla, for example. When Tesla came out, I was like, wow, and now they're still crazy expensive, but they're not as expensive. And we hope that model will happen. And I see a lot of good reason to believe that. And it's interesting, one last comment on that is just that it's even mentioned amongst these high-level business people and academic professionals as myself, that there is an intelligence or something that one can start to understand if they are so brave to work with substances, and that is really that there is some kind of interconnectivity or wholeness in all of us and within all of us, and that they've even said letting what we have learned through these medicine journeys, through these psychedelic assisted journeys, let that intelligence help us guide how we run these businesses, which would mean that we're more about inclusivity and more about supporting each other. And though everyone needs to survive and make money and have great returns, there seems to be an awareness, at least, that there might be a way to do big business in a much more friendly, collaborative way. Only time will tell, but I think it's a great thing to put out into the universe at this time.
I have 2 quick questions for you, kind of wrapped into one, if you don't mind answering both at once. But from a geographic perspective, are you seeing psychedelic retreats popping up in certain locations more than others? And then the second part of that question is, if investors are looking to support the development of these retreats, what do you project for the near future? What do you think is going to happen?
I absolutely believe, Costa Rica is apparently sort of the mecca for this right now. There's a number of companies that are popping up there. Jamaica is also a hugely popular one. There's words that a lot of the little islands like St. Kitts, St. Nevis in the Caribbean, that they're going to start to open up legislature that will allow this to all happen above ground. So in other words, I think the theme is warmth, water, beauty, places that you'd really want to go, destination locations. Los Cabos, Mexico is another one I know of. So I think that's definitely the geography answer, though I do think there will be some programming that's going to open up in more bigger cities, probably, initially like Vancouver already has that going on, Toronto to an effect. So, that will, I think, continue, but I think for the retreat centers, we're looking at those kind of locations. And I think what we're looking at is probably, realistically with most, if not any of these emerging companies, we're looking at roughly a 2-year kind of startup development stages where there can be, minimal operations, but some level of hopefully returns, if not returns, at least seeing that, okay, this model is sticking, this model is working, they're waitlisted for 6 months, that's a good sign. Just taking time to really build out the type of facilities, because if you're really going to do this work properly, the old structures of existing retreat centers and such that you could buy, they can do, but they really don't serve the greater goal, and there's something to the architecture and the design. So, I think within 2 to 3 years, we're going to see where this is much more becoming the standard of what people are looking for. And let's just dream it awake together for a second. Who wouldn't like to go to a 4 to 5 star resort retreat and be kind of pampered and eat good food and get massages and also do some personal development work and maybe some psychedelics if you're feeling a wild hair, right? Why wouldn't any of us on the planet want to do that? And initially I think there will be a certain social class that can afford to do these things in the coming few years. And yet I know that the bigger plan amongst the leaders of the field is to disseminate this knowledge, this information, and so I think that that's also a byproduct of something that's scalable, and that's also important to think about as an investment.
Thank you, Jesse. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. I just want to close by saying thank you so much, and grateful for this chance, and happy that this is even a topic that's considered worthy of conversation these days. And hopefully this is helpful to any listeners and getting more clarity around. I'll leave with this little antidote that money is actually just energy, so much so that we actually call it currency, just like electricity. And so if we can learn to think about that way, it's where are we going to focus our energy? Where are we going to put our intentions in the way that we can influence the world? And that's not my job to tell you where, it's just hopefully my job to get you to think deeper about it. And I appreciate that opportunity.